The rain fell in sheets, blurring the neon lights of the city as 18-year-old Lena Carter stood beneath the awning of a corner store, clutching a tattered duffel bag. Her breath hitched, not from the cold, but from the weight of her father's words, still echoing in her ears. "You're no longer part of this family." The memory of that night was a blade, sharp and unrelenting, slicing through her every time she closed her eyes. At 18, she'd been cast out, disowned for daring to dream beyond the rigid expectations of her wealthy, controlling family. They wanted her to marry young, to play the part of a dutiful daughter in their empire of real estate and influence. Lena wanted more. She wanted to build, to create, to prove she was more than their name. And for that, they'd severed her from their world. The city was merciless that night, its skyscrapers looming like indifferent giants. Lena had no money, no plan, only the clothes in her bag and a stubborn spark in her chest that refused to die. She'd grown up in privilege, surrounded by marble floors and crystal chandeliers. But none of it was hers anymore. Her father, Richard Carter, had made that clear when he handed her a one-way bus ticket and $100 in cash. "You'll fail," he'd said, his voice cold as the steel in his office tower. "And when you do, don't come crawling back." Lena didn't cry. Not then. She walked through the rain, her sneakers soaking through, until she found a shelter tucked in an alley. The woman at the desk, a kind-eyed volunteer named Marla, took one look at Lena's trembling hands and offered her a cot and a warm meal. It wasn't much, a bowl of watery soup and a thin blanket, but it was the first kindness Lena had felt in days. Sitting on the edge of the cot, surrounded by the murmurs of others seeking refuge, Lena made a vow to herself: she would rise. Not to prove her family wrong, but to prove herself right. The next morning, Lena took stock of her situation. The $100 wouldn't last long, and the city was no place for the unprepared. She needed work, a place to stay, and a way to keep that spark alive. Marla, sensing her determination, pointed her toward a diner a few blocks away that was hiring. "They don't pay much," Marla warned, "but it's a start." Lena nodded, her jaw set. A start was all she needed. The diner was a greasy spoon called Joe's, where the air smelled of burnt coffee and bacon. The manager, a gruff man named Eddie, barely glanced at her resume, mostly fabricated, since Lena's life had been private tutors and gala dinners. "Can you handle a rush?" he asked, eyeing her skeptically. Lena met his gaze. "I can handle anything." He hired her on the spot, though she suspected it was more out of desperation than belief in her. The work was grueling. Lena scrubbed tables, poured coffee, and smiled through insults from customers who didn't tip. Her hands grew raw from dishwater. Her feet ached from 12-hour shifts. But she didn't complain. Every dollar she earned went into a small tin she kept under her cot at the shelter. She wasn't saving for comfort. She was saving for opportunity. At night, when the shelter quieted, Lena pored over library books on business and real estate, teaching herself what her family had never bothered to. She learned about property markets, zoning laws, and the art of negotiation. Her father's world had been built on those principles, but Lena would build her own better, stronger, and on her terms. Months passed, and Lena moved out of the shelter into a cramped studio apartment, shared with a roommate who worked nights. The place was a far cry from the mansion she'd grown up in, but it was hers, paid for with her own sweat. She took a second job at a local bookstore, where she could read during slow hours. The owner, Mr. Patel, noticed her hunger for knowledge and slipped her extra books on finance and entrepreneurship. "You've got fire, kid," he told her one day, handing her a worn copy of The Art of the Deal. "Don't let it burn out." Lena didn't. She enrolled in night classes at a community college, juggling her jobs and studies with a discipline that surprised even herself. She was no longer the sheltered girl who'd been handed everything. She was becoming someone new, someone forged in adversity. But the pain of her family's rejection lingered, a shadow that followed her through every triumph. She saw their faces in every skyscraper, every luxury car that passed her on the street. They thought she'd break. They thought she'd beg. They were wrong. One evening, while sorting through a stack of old newspapers at the bookstore, Lena found an article about her father's company, Carter Enterprises. They were expanding, snapping up properties across the city. The photo showed Richard shaking hands with a developer, his smile as polished as ever. Lena's stomach twisted, but not with envy, with resolve. She tore out the article and tucked it into her tin. It wasn't just a reminder of what she'd lost. It was a map to what she'd take back. By her 20th birthday, Lena had saved enough to invest in a small, rundown property on the edge of the Sitya foreclosed warehouse no one else wanted. She saw potential where others saw ruin. With a loan from a local credit union, secured through sheer persistence, she bought it. It was her first step, a shaky one, but it was hers. She didn't know it then, but that warehouse would be the foundation of everything to come. The warehouse smelled of rust and forgotten dreams, its windows cracked and its floors stained with years of neglect. Lena stood in the center of the cavernous space, her hands on her hips, imagining what it could become. To anyone else, it was a liability. To her, it was a canvas. She'd spent every cent she had and some. She didn't on this gamble. The loan payments loomed like a storm cloud, but Lena had faced worse storms. She wasn't afraid. Renovating the warehouse was a battle. Lena worked alongside a small crew of contractors she could barely afford, learning to swing a hammer and operate a power drill. Her nights at the diner and bookstore continued, her days filled with sawdust and sweat. She slept in snatches, her body aching, but her mind was alive with possibility. The warehouse wasn't just a building. It was her defiance, her proof that she could create something from nothing. Her first tenant was a startup run by a pair of idealistic tech graduates, desperate for cheap office space. Lena negotiated a lease that was fair but firm, her self-taught knowledge giving her an edge. The startup moved in, and their rent payments gave her breathing room. She reinvested every dollar into the property, fixing leaks, upgrading wiring, and painting the walls a crisp white. Word spread, and soon, another Tenanta small graphic design firm signed on. The warehouse was no longer a relic. It was becoming a hub. But success didn't come without setbacks. A pipe burst one winter, flooding the ground floor and costing her thousands she didn't have. She maxed out her credit cards to cover it. Her stomach knotted with fear. There were nights when she sat alone in the half-finished warehouse, questioning if she'd bitten off more than she could chew. But then she'd think of her father's voice, "You'll fail," and she'd get back to work. Failure wasn't an option. Lena's life became a rhythm of hustle and hope. She attended networking events, her thrift store blazer a stark contrast to the tailored suits around her. She didn't care. She listened, learned, and pitched her vision to anyone who would hear it. Some dismissed her, a young woman with no credentials, no family name to lean on, but others saw her fire. One of those was Clara, a retired real estate agent who'd seen her share of dreamers. "You've got grit," Clara told her over coffee one day. "That's worth more than money." Clara became a mentor, guiding Lena through the labyrinth of property laws and investor pitches. By 22, Lena had turned the warehouse into a thriving co-working space. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, and it was profitable. She paid off her loan early, a moment that felt like shedding chains. She celebrated alone, with a cheap bottle of wine and a view of the city from the warehouse roof. The skyline glittered, and for the first time, Lena felt like she belonged among those lights. Her next move was bolder. She bought another property, dilapidated office building in a neighborhood on the cusp of revival. This time, she had investors, small ones who believed in her track record. Clara helped her navigate the deal, and Lena poured everything into the renovation. She worked with architects, negotiated with suppliers, and even designed the lobby herself, a sleek space with reclaimed wood and glass. The building filled quickly with tenants, from startups to established firms, drawn by Lena's reputation for creating spaces that felt alive. But the shadow of her family never left her. Carter Enterprises was a giant in the city's real estate scene, their name on billboards and skyscrapers. Lena avoided their properties, but she couldn't avoid the news. Her father's company was facing challenges over leveraged deals, lawsuits from tenants, whispers of mismanagement. Lena didn't gloat. She didn't have time. But she couldn't deny the flicker of satisfaction when she saw their stock dip. They'd underestimated her, and she was proving them wrong, brick by brick. Lena's days were long, her nights longer. She lived frugally, still in that cramped studio, saving every penny for her next project. Her roommate, a nurse named Sarah, became her closest friend, the one person who saw Lena's exhaustion and pushed her to keep going. "You're building an empire," Sarah said one night, handing her a cup of tea. Lena laughed, but the word empire stuck with her. She wasn't just surviving. She was creating something that could outlast her pain. By 25, Lena owned 3 properties, each more ambitious than the last. She'd learned to play the game, leveraging loans, charming investors, and outworking everyone around her. But she never forgot where she'd started. She donated to the shelter that had taken her in, hired Marla as her office manager, and gave internships to kids from tough backgrounds. She wanted to give others the chance she'd fought for. Her buildings weren't just structures. They were symbols of what was possible when you refused to give up. Lena was 27 when she set her sights on the Crown Building, a sleek, 20-story tower in the heart of the city. It was a prize, a symbol of success that even her father had coveted but never secured. The building was owned by a struggling developer, its upper floors vacant, its potential untapped. Lena saw it as her masterpiece, the project that would cement her place in the city's skyline. But the price was astronomical, and the competition was fierce. Carter Enterprises was among the bidders. The irony wasn't lost on Lena. Her father's company, now led by her older brother, James, was circling the same prize. James, who'd once called her a spoiled dreamer when she dared to question their family's values, was now the polished face of Carter Enterprises. Lena hadn't seen him in years, but she'd heard he was ruthless, cutting corners to keep their empire afloat. She didn't care about their drama. She cared about winning. Lena spent months preparing her bid. She worked with Clara and a team of analysts, crunching numbers and refining her pitch. She met with banks, pitching her vision with a confidence that masked her nerves. The Crown Building wasn't just a property. It was a statement. If she could secure it, she'd be playing on the same stage as her family, not as their equal, but as their better. The bidding process was a gauntlet. Lena faced skeptical investors who questioned her youth, her lack of formal education, her audacity. But she had a track record now, a portfolio of successful properties that spoke louder than any degree. She leaned on her tenants, who wrote glowing testimonials about her management style: fair, innovative, and human. She leveraged every connection she'd built, from Mr. Patel at the bookstore to the tech startups in her first warehouse. Her bid was lean but strategic. offering a vision for the Crown building that blended modern design with community impact. The day of the final presentations, Lena walked into the boardroom in a tailored suit she'd saved months to buy. Her heart pounded, but her face was a mask of calm. James was there, flanked by executives in expensive suits, his smirk a mirror of their father's. He didn't acknowledge her, but she felt his gaze, heavy with condescension. Lena ignored him, focusing on the panel of investors. Her presentation was flawless, data-driven, passionate, and rooted in a belief that buildings could change lives. She spoke of affordable office spaces for startups, green initiatives, and community programs. She spoke from the heart, and it showed. When the decision came, it was unanimous. Lena's company, Carter Innovations, won the Crown building. The room was silent as the developer shook her hand, his smile genuine. James stormed out, his face a storm of rage and disbelief. Lena didn't watch him go. She was already thinking about the work ahead. The acquisition was a turning point. The press took notice, dubbing Lena the rising star of real estate. Articles praised her grit, her vision, her ability to turn overlooked properties into gold. She hated the spotlight, but she used it, leveraging the attention to attract new investors and tenants. The Crown building became her flagship, its renovation a testament to her skill. She preserved its historic facade while modernizing the interiors, creating a space that felt both timeless and cutting-edge. But success didn't erase the past. Lena's family reached out for the first time in years, not with apologies, but with veiled offers to collaborate. Her father's email was curt, praising her unexpected competence and suggesting a partnership. Lena deleted it without responding. She didn't need their validation. She'd built her own empire, one that stood for more than profit. Her buildings housed dreamers, artists, entrepreneurs, nonprofits who couldn't afford the rents her family charged. She was changing the city, one lease at a time. Lena's personal life, though, remained a quiet corner of her world. She dated sparingly, wary of anyone who might see her success before they saw her. Sarah, her roommate, was her anchor, the one who reminded her to laugh, to rest, to live. They'd moved into a better apartment together, a modest 2-bedroom with a view of the river. It wasn't lavish, but it was home. Lena framed the torn-out article about her father's company and hung it on her wall not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how far she'd come. By 29, Lena owned a portfolio of 6 properties, each a testament to her vision. She'd become a mentor herself, guiding young entrepreneurs through the same challenges she'd faced. She spoke at community colleges, sharing her story with kids who reminded her of herself at 18, scared but determined. She told them what Clara had told her: grit was worth more than money. And she believed it. The call came on a Tuesday morning, as Lena was reviewing blueprints for her next project. Marla's voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "It's your brother, James. He's here. Wants to meet." Lena's first instinct was to say no, to keep the door to her past firmly shut. But curiosity and maybe a flicker of defiance made her agree. "Send him up," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. James walked into her office at the Crown building, his suit impeccable, his expression guarded. The years hadn't been kind to him. There were lines around his eyes, a tightness to his jaw that spoke of stress. Carter Enterprises was faltering, its reputation tarnished by bad deals and worse decisions. Lena had followed the news, not out of spite, but because knowledge was power. She knew they were desperate for office space, their flagship building lost to creditors. And now, James was here, in her domain. "Lena," he said, his tone clipped. "You've done well." It wasn't a compliment. It was a concession, grudging and cold. He sat without being invited, his eyes scanning her office, the modern desk, the city view, the framed article on the wall. Lena leaned back in her chair, her posture relaxed but her gaze sharp. "What do you want, James?" she asked, cutting through the pretense. He shifted, uncomfortable, then laid out his pitch. Carter Enterprises needed office space in the Crown Building. They were willing to pay premium rates, he said, as if money could erase the past. Lena listened, her face unreadable. When he finished, she let the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate. "You think I'd lease to you?" she said finally, her voice low but laced with steel. "After what you did. After what Dad did." James flinched, but he didn't back down. He spoke of mutual benefits, of rebuilding bridges, of family. Lena laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Family. You cut me off at 18. You left me with nothing. Don't talk to me about family." The conversation was a dance, each probing the other's weaknesses. James tried charm, then pressure, hinting at their father's influence, their connections. Lena didn't budge. She'd built her world without them, and she didn't need their scraps now. "I'll think about it," she said at last, not because she would, but because she wanted him to leave with uncertainty. After he left, Lena stood at her window, the city sprawling below. She felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. She'd won, but the cost was still there, etched into her bones. That night, she called Clara, who listened as Lena poured out the story. "You don't owe them anything," Clara said firmly. "Not a lease. Not forgiveness. Nothing." Lena nodded, though Clara couldn't see it. She knew her mentor was right, but the weight of the past was hard to shake. The next day, Lena declined James's request. She did it in writing, her letter polite but firm. The Crown Building was for those who shared her vision, not for those who tried to break her. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her success was her answer. But the encounter lit a fire in her. She doubled down on her work, acquiring 2 more properties, a community center and a mixed-use complex. She partnered with nonprofits to provide affordable spaces for artists and small businesses, earning her a reputation as a developer who cared. The press called her a game changer, a label she wore with quiet pride. Her buildings weren't just profitable. They were purposeful, a reflection of the values her family had never understood. Lena's 30th birthday was a quiet affair, celebrated with Sarah, Marla, and Clara at a small restaurant near the river. They toasted to her success, to the empire she'd built from $100 and a duffel bag. Lena smiled, but her thoughts were on the future. She wasn't done climbing. By 30, Lena was a force in the city's real estate world. Her company, Carter Innovations, was synonymous with innovation and integrity. She owned 10 properties, each a testament to her vision, spaces that uplifted, that gave opportunities to those who'd been overlooked. The Crown Building was her crown jewel, its lobby a bustling hub of creativity and ambition. Lena walked its halls daily, greeting tenants by name, listening to their stories. She wasn't just their landlord. She was their ally. But the past wasn't done with her. A month after her birthday, she received a letter, not an email, but a handwritten note, sealed with her father's monogram. Richard Carter wanted to meet. Not at her office, not at his, but at a neutral location, a cafe near the park where Lena used to play as a child. The request was so unlike him that Lena almost refused. But something, curiosity, closure, or maybe defiance, made her agree. The cafe was quiet when Lena arrived, her father already seated at a corner table. He was older than she remembered, his hair gray, His shoulders slightly stooped, but his eyes were the same sharp, calculating, always searching for an angle. "Lena," he said, standing as she approached. His voice was softer than she expected, almost hesitant. They talked for an hour. The conversation a careful dance. Richard didn't apologize. Not directly, but he acknowledged her success. His words measured. "I underestimated you," he said, stirring his coffee. "I thought you'd break." Lena met his gaze, unflinching. "I didn't," she said simply. She didn't need his approval, but hearing him admit his mistake was a quiet victory. He spoke of Carter Enterprises, its struggles, its debts. He didn't ask for a lease, not like James had, but Lena sensed the desperation beneath his polished exterior. She didn't offer help, and he didn't ask. Instead, he asked about her buildings, her vision, her life. For the first time, Lena felt he was seeing her, not as a disappointment, but as a person. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a crack in the wall between them. Lena left the cafe with a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, and something like hope. She didn't forgive her father. Not fully. But she realized she didn't need to carry his rejection anymore. She'd built her own legacy, one that stood taller than his empire ever would. Back at the Crown Building, Lena threw herself into her next project, a foundation to support young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. She called it Spark, a nod to the fire that had kept her going at 18. The foundation offered grants, mentorship, and office space in her buildings, giving others the chance she'd fought for. She hired Marla to run it, trusting her warmth and wisdom to guide the next generation. Lena's story spread, inspiring articles, podcasts, even a documentary. She shied away from the fame, but she used it to amplify her mission. She spoke at conferences, sharing her journey with raw honesty. "I was cut off at 18, she'd say, her voice steady. But I didn't let that define me. You don't need a name or money to build something real. You just need to keep going." The Crown Building's grand reopening was a celebration of everything Lena had built. The lobby was packed with tenants, investors, and community leaders, their voices mingling with the clink of glasses and the hum of live music. Lena stood at the podium, her suit sharp, her smile genuine. She spoke of the building's history, its transformation, and the people who made it possible: her team, her tenants, her mentors. She didn't mention her family, but their absence was a silent presence, a shadow she'd long outgrown. The press was there, cameras flashing as Lena cut the ribbon. The event was more than a reopening. It was a declaration. Carter Innovations wasn't just a company. It was a movement. Lena's buildings were changing the city, offering spaces where dreams could take root. The Spark Foundation had already funded a dozen startups, their founders in the crowd, their gratitude palpable. After the speeches, Lena slipped away to the roof, needing a moment to breathe. The city stretched out before her, its lights a constellation of possibility. She thought of the girl she'd been at 18, soaked and scared, clutching a duffel bag. That girl had dreamed of this moment, but she couldn't have imagined its weight: the pride, the responsibility, the quiet joy of knowing she'd done it on her own. Sarah found her there, a glass of champagne in hand. "You okay, boss?" she teased, nudging Lena's shoulder. Lena laughed, taking the glass. "Better than okay." They stood together, watching the city pulse below. Lena felt a surge of gratitude for Sarah, for Clara, for Marla, for every person who'd believed in her when she had nothing. The next day, Lena got a call from a reporter. Carter Enterprises had filed for bankruptcy. James had stepped down, and her father was retiring. The news should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Lena felt only a quiet sadness for the family she'd lost, for the empire that had crumbled under its own weight. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her success was her answer, written in steel and glass. Lena's focus turned to the future. She had plans: more buildings, more foundations, more ways to give back. She was already scouting a new property, a historic theater she wanted to restore. It was a risk, but Lena thrived on risks. She'd learned that failure wasn't the end. It was just a step. As she walked through the Crown Building's lobby, a young intern approached her, nervous but eager. "Ms. Carter, I have an idea for a community space," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. Lena smiled, seeing herself in his eyes, the hunger, the spark. "Tell me about it," she said, and they sat down, the city humming around them. Lena Carter wasn't just a survivor. She was a builder, a dreamer, a force. They'd cut her off at 18, but she'd built an empire from nothing. And now, as she stood in the heart of her own creation, she knew this was only the beginning.